The grandfather paradox. Let's kick things off with one of the most famous time travel paradoxes, the grandfather paradox. Imagine you go back in time and accidentally or intentionally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. What happens next? Well, if your grandfather never meets your grandmother, one of your parents is never born, and that means you are never born. So if you're never born, how did you go back in time in the first place to stop their meeting? This creates a logical loop, often called a paradox, where cause and effect get all jumbled up. One popular solution to this paradox is the idea of alternate timelines. When you change the past, you're not affecting your own timeline, but rather creating a new one. In this alternate timeline, your grandfather never meets your grandmother, but in the original timeline, everything happened as it should and you still exist. Bootstrap Paradox. Next up is the Bootstrap Paradox, a mind-bending scenario where an object or piece of information exists without ever being created. Here's how it works. Suppose you travel back in time and hand Shakespeare a copy of one of his plays. He then takes credit for it, publishes it, and the play becomes a classic. Now the question is, where did the play originally come from? You got it from Shakespeare in the past, but Shakespeare got it from you in the future. This creates a closed loop where the information or object exists without a clear point of origin. The Bootstrap Paradox raises questions about the nature of causality. How can something exist without ever being created? Some physicists suggest this paradox might be possible as long as time is a self-consistent loop, but it's still one of the most puzzling aspects of time travel theory. Predestination Paradox. The Predestination Paradox is another brain teaser. In this paradox, events in the future cause events in the past, which then lead to the future events happening exactly as they were supposed to. Essentially, the future and the past are locked in a cycle, and time travelers can't change anything. They can only fulfill a role that's already been predetermined. Imagine this. You go back in time to stop a major event, but in the process, you cause the event you were trying to prevent. It's as if the universe conspires to make sure things play out the way they always have. One of the best examples of this paradox is in the movie 12 Monkeys, where the protagonist travels back in time to prevent a viral outbreak, but ends up being part of the events that led to the outbreak in the first place. The time loop paradox, causal loop. Let's talk about the time loop paradox, also known as a causal loop. This occurs when a sequence of events causes itself to happen, creating a never-ending cycle of time. The event in the past causes something in the future, which in turn causes the original event in the past. A simple example is this. You travel back in time and give a scientist the blueprint for a time machine. The scientist uses those blueprints to invent the time machine, which you eventually use to travel back in time and give the scientist the blueprint. It's a self-sustaining loop with no clear point of origin. Much like the Bootstrap Paradox, causal loops mess with the idea of cause and effect as we know it. Fermi Paradox, time travel version. The Fermi Paradox usually refers to the absence of observable alien civilizations, but it's also been applied to time travel. If time travel is possible, then where are all the time travelers? Shouldn't we have already encountered visitors from the future by now? One potential explanation is the idea that time travelers might be bound by strict rules. Maybe they can't reveal themselves to people in the past, or perhaps they exist in a separate timeline, unable to interact with ours. Another possibility is that time travel, while theoretically possible, is practically unachievable due to the immense energy required. This paradox leaves us questioning why, if time travel exists in the future, we haven't seen any signs of it yet. Polchinski's paradox. Let's get into something a little more technical. Polchinski's paradox, named after the physicist Joseph Polchinski. It imagines a billiard ball being sent back in time through a wormhole. The ball is set up to collide with its past self in such a way that it prevents the original billiard ball from ever entering the wormhole in the first place. This, of course, leads to a paradox where the ball both does and doesn't enter the wormhole. This paradox delves into the physical implications of time travel, suggesting that time travel could violate the laws of physics as we understand them. Some theories propose that there may be subtle mechanisms, like tiny nudges from the universe itself, that prevent these kinds of paradoxes from happening. The Ontological Paradox. Another head-scratcher is the Ontological Paradox, closely related to the Bootstrap Paradox. This paradox deals specifically with the question of identity and existence. Imagine meeting your older self who gives you a journal filled with important life lessons. As time goes on, you follow those lessons, write them in the journal, and eventually give it to your younger self. But who originally wrote the lessons? The information seems to have no starting point, existing only because of time travel. The Ontological Paradox raises deep questions about the origin of objects and information in a timeline. It suggests that something, or someone, can exist solely because of time travel, without ever being created through natural causes. The observer effect. Finally, let's talk about the observer effect in time travel. This isn't exactly a paradox, but more of a complication. The observer effect in physics states that the act of observing or measuring something can affect its outcome. In the context of time travel, simply witnessing an event in the past might change it in subtle ways. Imagine going back to observe a historical moment, but by being there, you unintentionally alter the course of history. This idea is closely related to the butterfly effect, where even the smallest changes in the past, like stepping on a butterfly, could have massive consequences in the future. Time travelers would have to be extremely careful not to alter anything, even unintentionally, to avoid disastrous changes in their own timeline. The butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is rooted in chaos theory and suggests that even the smallest changes in the past can have massive consequences in the future. It's named after the idea that the flap of a butterfly's wings could set off a chain reaction, leading to a tornado weeks later. In time travel, this concept is particularly dangerous. A tiny action like stepping on an insect or changing the path of a river could drastically reshape the future in ways no one could predict. Imagine you travel back to a time before the dinosaurs. While there, you've accidentally stepped on a small insect. When you return to the present, you find the world unrecognizable, new languages, different world powers, or maybe even no humans at all. The idea is that the small action of stepping on that insect altered millions of years of evolutionary history. The butterfly effect teaches us that time is incredibly delicate. A small nudge in the past can create a tidal wave of change in the future. This paradox makes time travel a risky endeavor since any unintended action could have catastrophic consequences. The Novikov self-consistency principle. The Novikov self-consistency principle was proposed by Russian physicist Igor Novikov. It aims to resolve the contradictions of time travel by suggesting that it's impossible to change the past. According to this principle, the laws of physics would somehow prevent any actions that could create a paradox. For instance, if you went back in time to stop a historical event like the sinking of the Titanic, the universe would correct itself to ensure that the event still happens. This means that no matter what you try, the past cannot be altered in a way that would cause inconsistencies. Imagine you try to save someone from dying in a historical accident. According to Novikov's principle, your attempts would fail due to circumstances beyond your control. Maybe an unforeseen accident occurs, or maybe the person refuses your help. Either way, the universe prevents you from changing the past. The Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that time is self-healing and will prevent any alterations that could cause paradoxes. Time travel may be possible, but your actions in the past are already part of the timeline and cannot change it. So there you have it, every major time travel paradox explained in just 10 minutes. Whether it's the mind-bending loops of the Bootstrap Paradox or the universe-defying complications of the Grandfather Paradox, these scenarios show how tricky time travel can be. It raises questions about reality, causality, and whether time can really be manipulated without creating chaos. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into time travel paradoxes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more thought-provoking content. And as always, let me know in the comments which time travel paradox blows your mind the most.